Welcome to Between Authors. I'm your host, author Adrian Lopez. If you enjoyed the video today, don't forget to leave a like and leave a comment down below to let us know if you enjoyed the video or if you have any questions for us. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification so you don't miss all the amazing authors coming up. What is it that excites us as a reader? It's finding that author or book that you may never have heard of or may never have seen, sort of like the treasure hunt as a reader. The goal for my podcast is to bring to you those authors or books that you may never have found that may have been the treasure you've been searching for all along. Today on episode 26, I bring to you author Zach Moulder. We're going to discuss a little bit about himself, what he's published, what he's working on, and maybe what his plans are for the future. Welcome to the show, Zach.
There you go, Zach Moulder. I'm an Australian author currently living in Townsville, Queensland. It's very hot here, so I'm glad to be indoors and not roasting outside. Thanks for having me here.
Why don't you give a little bit about a little introduction to yourself to the viewer? Tell them, kind of like what your interests are, what you like to do, things like that.
Yeah, so obviously aside from writing, I'm a massive fan of tabletop games, all that stuff. So Warhammer 40k, all that sort of stuff. I actually play on proper teams for that. So that's always a good thing to do when I'm not writing. Otherwise, like a good cruise on the motorbike as well. That's always a nice thing to do. Going up on mountain trails and all that stuff. And also just like this sitting down with my mates at a pub or something, having a pub feed, enjoying watching local fights or something, and just like enjoying the vibe and the atmospheres. That it's just what you have with your mates, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't you give the viewers a little bit of an idea about what your influences are? What influenced you creatively for your writing and what you do?
So as I mentioned before, like I'm into like Warhammer 40k as well as being a tabletop game. They also have a plethora of novels, like hundreds of novels and stuff. So I love to read that. That's sort of like the inspiration of my sci-fi sort of side, as well as like movies like Star Wars, Back to the Future as well. That's a big one. Aliens and like there's like old school sci-fi movies that are in the realm of aliens, Starship Troopers, all that cool stuff. Yeah. As well as like music as well. Like music is, I found, manages to bring up like a really interesting mood in me. Like if I were to listen to a certain song, I'd be able to think of like a certain, or like correlated to a certain scene that I've thought of, sort of like a movie soundtrack, I guess you could think of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you find, are you one of the authors that, I mean, I like to do it, but do you listen? Do you have noise in the back as you write, or do you like it very quiet?
Yeah, so yeah, just to completely counter what I just said, I actually like writing in complete silence. So it's more of like when I'm not writing, I like to have the music going, but once I'm going, I prefer perfect silence, which is why like sometimes it's a bit hard where I have like noisy neighbors or something. It's just like, oh, please. I wish I had noise canceling headphones or something, just so I have to deal with it all.
Yeah, I'm the complete opposite. I need something in the background. It's either music, it's the TV. I need something making noise. I've been like that since I was in school. I need something. It actually makes me focus better when there's something in the background to kind of tune out. I actually can focus better on what I'm doing. But I guess just the way I operate. Have you ever thought of? I know some other authors do like a playlist for their books. And I know how you're saying how some songs have, given you a certain mood for a scene. Have you ever thought about doing that, giving yourself almost like a playlist for your book as you're thinking about it? Like you said, you don't use it when you're actually writing, but kind of get you in that mindset for what the story's about.
Well, I do actually have a playlist that I listen to, which is called what is it called? Writing Vibes. That's what I called it. And it really is just like songs that make me think of like specific scenes or something. So like if I want to write like a certain scene, I'll actually try and find the song beforehand, listen to it, and it'll be like, oh yeah, that's good. And then I'll actually start writing once it's done. Not when it's playing, because then I'm too busy enjoying the song before then. But after that, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something I've noticed lately that a lot more authors are doing. I was just curious if it was something that you had as well. So let's talk about your book. What's the title of your book, and why don't you give the viewers a little bit of a summary about what it's about?
So, I got up here. It's called Mark of Eternity, and it is about a family that who are the last survivors of a colony ship that crash landed on a world after departing Earth 10,000 years ago. And basically what they need to try and do is they discover that there's a satellite orbiting the world that was only built recently, and they want to try and build a rocket and get it up to the satellite so then they can escape what is essentially like a prison that they never dreamt of being into. They just sort of like just dropped in there. So they're scavenging through the ruins of their ship. They're fighting off the completely inhospitable terrain. It's a totally locked world, so they're stuck on the dark side. There's never any sunlight. It's extremely cold. The air is utterly unbreathable. There's this phenomenon called the rain, which is pretty much like super acidic rain. If you're out there in the rain, like you'll be melted to a puddle in just a few seconds. So it truly is like a horrific environment that they're trying to escape from.
And how was it? Because generally this is a sci-fi, so how was it having to build that entire world? Because basically you have to do that from scratch to give the the readers an idea of what that world's like.
I guess in a way it was easy because most of it is just a barren wasteland. There was only a few key a few key locations in it, so it wasn't too difficult for me to try and figure out. I have made more like complex maps, which obviously were a lot harder. But for this one in particular, because it's just such a small novel, I just wanted to keep it nice and concise, not too bloated. I just wanted to try and keep the word count as low as possible.
Okay. And how many words is this book?
It is just short of 58,000.
Okay.
So it's really in a novella sort of realm.
Yeah. So, I generally have a couple of questions that I ask in regards to the book. So, for your book, was there a favorite scene that you had in this book?
Definitely. So it's a few, but if I had to pick one, it would have to be where the main character, who's called Eve, she's in like the bowels of the ship, and because it used to be a floating city, so there's like hundreds of thousands of people living on it. So to make it somewhat livable, the creators made like this massive park. Pretty much think of it like Central Park in New York. This massive park with like trees and stuff and like massive pillars holding up the roofs and verandas going all around it so people can see, sort of like in a mall. And what happens in that scene is Eve comes up and is walking out across the Central Park, and through like some miracle, the sun lamps that keep like the trees alive with artificial sunlight are still working. So all the trees are still alive. They're still surviving. Some have obviously been killed in the crash, like with like debris and stuff. But Eve, who's never seen anything living before aside from her parents, she sees these trees and like goes up to them and touches them and is so like confused on what they are. Like she thinks, is this really alive or is it like not alive? And she looks down. This is like a bit is my favorite part of it, was like she looks down and realizes she's stepped on all the grass, and she like has a bit of like a moment of panic, like, oh no, I've hurt the plants or something, and she like jumps back. It's like, well, can I even feel pain, or do that. Like she's down there trying to like pick at the grass and trying to like pull leaf off. So will they hurt if I pick it off? Like that was my favorite, just for like, you know, it's something we sort of take for granted, I suppose. But you know, it's just so fun being able to write that really like unusual like experience for someone who's obviously never seen like a tree before. And yeah, that was really fun, and that's why L1 was my favorite.
That sounds great, actually. Did you have a hard scene in the book?
Hardest would say the hardest would have to be action scene. So I won't say anything because there's a bit of a spoiler, but I do have problems with pacing and action, I suppose. It's more of like a slow, sort of like methodical story sort of thing. So when an action scene comes up, I'm sort of like, oh, I don't know what happens. I got to write faster now. I can't have as many details as possible. But yeah, and there's like two action scenes I can think of in there that were just like really hard, just mainly for having to change the pace, and try to keep it engaging and not like, you know, she punched someone or whatever, and then the scene's over. I was like, well, hang on, it's got to be a bit more than that. That's the bit that I struggled the most with.
Yeah. Did you do any research specifically for this book?
I guess I didn't set out to do any specific research. Like I've sort of just passively absorbed like sci-fi stuff like throughout my life and all that. 40K is a big inspiration and source of research for the whole like grimdark vibe for it. But also like I also have like a bit of knowledge in the realistic sort of side of it. So like tidally locked planets and all that, like how they work, what would happen on like, you know, each of the sides, and coincidentally the habitable ring in the middle. Like, you know, what will happen over like the vast distances like between worlds. I did actually have the research like theoreticals on how colony ships are supposed to function. Like a lot of people say that you know, they could have just cryogenically frozen the passengers. Like yeah, they could, but then that like there's also like a lot of energy requirements for such a thing. Like it might just be like a lot cheaper just to leave them alive, sort of thing. So that's sort of like something I had to like figure out. As well as like general functioning of ships. Obviously, we don't have anything that big, but it's more of like looking at like plans and stuff that other people have made, and just sort of like taking what I want from it and then amalgamating it into what will eventually become the ship Eternity.
Yeah, the research part is interesting because you know, I've mentioned it before on the podcast, is that readers will catch when you don't know what you're talking about. There's always someone out there that knows what you're mentioning, you know, in detail, and it's difficult if you don't put the effort to do it. Like you said, having to figure out how would a colony like that work, because there you'll find that reader will find you and read it and say, "Oh, wait a minute, this didn't make any sense. This would have happened, and this would have happened." Especially in sci-fi. Sci-fi, you know, you have such a huge fan base that really are into it and really sometimes study all the different things that would be involved. And it's always very interesting that you need to do a little bit of it, because it'll get caught. I mean, somebody will find it. It's much more in the comic world. I mean, usually in the comic world, you have to know what you're talking about. Otherwise, you're just going to get killed on that side of it. But yeah, it's interesting how much you have to do a little bit to at least, you know, explain that you understand what's going on in some of these things.
Yeah, it is a bit of a pain, sort of like some of it does sort of show through when I'm trying to, when Eve's like soldering or like putting things together, I'm there like, I have no idea. Like, I haven't sold it in 10 years. I don't know what I'm doing. So no one's called me out on that yet. But yeah, there's something like electronics as well. Like, I don't know the names of things, so I use the word component a lot. There's a lot, probably like hundreds of those just throughout the book. So I'm just, I don't know what this thing is. Like, she welded this together. Like, I don't know. So I even said it wrong. It's soldered, not welded. But yeah, it's yeah, try. But yeah, right. Yeah, if you're sort of like faking it, people do tend to pick up on it pretty quick.
Yeah, and for some reason it'll stand out to them. They'll pinpoint it quickly and say, "Well, wait a minute, this didn't make any sense."
Mm.
So you self-published this book, correct?
Yes.
So for the viewers out there that are, say, newer writers getting into it, what would you say was something that was much easier than you expected in self-publishing, and something maybe that was much harder than you expected in self-publishing?
So something I found really easy was how simple it was to get your stuff uploaded. So I mainly go through Amazon, and like just like how easy it is just to upload a manuscript onto their site, and like pick a few keywords, and you're practically on there. Like, I can sort of see how like so many people have taken to it, just because it is just like they've done a good job at removing that massive roadblock, which obviously is often the main issue with traditional publishing, is just trying to get your foot in the door. Is that places like Amazon just let you slide in there and do it. That's sort of like the easier part. The harder part, though, is obviously trying to stand out from everyone else, because since it's self-published, you got to do everything yourself. All the I'll admit I'm pretty bad with marketing. I don't really like pushing my book because I feel it's annoying people. Even though I know I should, I don't really like to. But like, just it means it sort of becomes like a full-time job to market your stuff. You have to do it all the time, but not too much that you come off as like just like someone who's constantly peddling their stuff and is not like like whenever you're on Twitter and you show up, people think, oh, there's the person who is just constantly dropping their Amazon link. They're not actually like contributing anything, or yeah. So I guess it is pretty ironic that we go from traditional publishing, where someone does all the marketing for us, to then wind up having, like, as a full-time job, to wind up us having to do the full-time job for the marketing.
Yeah, what's interesting though is from some of the ones that I've interviewed in terms of the traditional publishing, you're still kind of basically on your own for the marketing. I mean, they get you out there, they put you in the spots you need to be, and they may put a blurb or something up, but basically you're still the one having to get your book out there. So it's actually not that much different, right? So it really is, especially for a young writer that wants to keep their voice, their vision of their book. Self-publishing is probably the way to go. And one of the other things I always try to mention on this podcast is, when you're trying to go the traditional route and you're querying all the time and you're putting stuff out there, it's hard as a creator, but you need to remember that it's just one person, right? It's one person's acceptance of your story. And if that person doesn't understand what you were trying to do, or doesn't understand your genre, or doesn't understand maybe the different direction you did with it, of course, they're not going to accept it. They're not going to say, oh, no, I'm going to pass on this one. And it has nothing to do with if your book is good or not, or if your work is good or not. It's, people have to remember that it's one person. It was one person that said, oh, no, I'm going to pass on this. And it really has nothing to do with your talent or how good your work was. And it's that patience that, if you go the traditional route, that you really need to have, because it could take forever to get, or maybe it never does, especially if you're somebody that's, an outlier in terms of the genre you're writing, or you came from a completely different direction. They may not understand it, but there'll be an audience for it. It's just a matter of getting it out there and finding them. But I guess for me, that's always been the difference between the traditional and self-publisher is just, be true to your voice and get it out there, right? Just get it out there and let the audience find it.
Yeah, definitely. Like, yeah, there's like the only real filter is you. So you do get to write write what you want, write the story that you want, and then get it out there. And then if you do the marketing right, people will find it, and then they'll spread it on and stuff. And yeah, like funny you said how traditionally, traditional publishing people like been querying for ages. Like I've seen like posts from people who like queried like several hundred times and stuff, and it really is just trying to find pretty much just like a normal reader, really trying to find someone who actually reads and like likes your book enough to actually want to take that one step further and publish it for you.
Yeah. And that's the thing to remember. It's one person, right? You're trying to get one agent to see your vision. And then once you have that, you're trying to get one publishing house to see your vision. But it's really always one contact, right? And you're never going to have 100% of people like what you do. You're just not going to have it. And it's just a matter of waiting it out to find that person. When if you go self-publishing, you don't have to wait. You just get it out there. So it's an interesting choice for a new writer to decide which way they want to go, right? Which direction they want to take it in.
Yeah, it really is a crossroads that they sort of really need to make. Obviously, there's nothing to stop us from bouncing between them, but yeah, it really is just like, especially as a first time author, it's like like for me, I reckon it's better just if it's your first time author, like go self-publishing for a bit. Like there's nothing really stopping you, since you'll have all the rights from pulling it from self-publishing and then getting it traditionally published eventually. So at least when you're self-published, it's out there, people are seeing it, which may help you with your querying in the future when they see that it's garnered a lot of interest in the self-publishing market, that perhaps it's worthwhile taking a step into the traditional market and spread it out to like bookstores and all those other places where Amazon can't quite reach with Amazon and other places with like their direct printing programs.
Yeah, I mean, I know if you go through, one of the things that I did my children's book with Amazon Publishing, which is like a publishing house, but it's still pretty much you. It's like a package you buy. And what they do is they load it on both KDP and they load it on Ingram Spark. So you get both, right? You get a little bit of both worlds, because you get your ebook on KDP for Kindle Unlimited and everything. But then Ingram Spark also loads your paperback or hardcover on Amazon, but then they load it on Barnes and Noble and a bunch of other ones. And from what I understand, even though I haven't been successful yet, is that Barnes and Noble has a program called a local authors program. And if you have your book on their website and you speak to one of the local stores, sometimes they will order that book into their store. So you can actually get your book into a Barnes and Noble store. I've tried it. I've contacted 3 or 4 different ones. They gave me the contact. They said, this is this person to speak to for the program. So the program is actually valid. It's a valid program, but as of yet, nobody's emailed me back. So I don't know if it's a valid program that they're just not interested or what. But apparently that's one thing you can do, is get your book into a Barnes and Noble by being at least on their website. But it hasn't been successful as of yet. So it'd be interesting to see if that changes.
I guess that sort of comes back to the whole appealing to a single person sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, yeah, I want to stock that book on my shelf sort of thing. Like, yeah, just finding the right person, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, and that's really the thing. It's one contact, right? You always have to remember that it's one contact. There's one voice that just may not agree with what you have, and it's hard, but it's something you have to realize that that's essentially the way it's going to work. I mean, I went self-publishing because my kind of goal was to do everything different than what I've read or what I've seen. My werewolf book is a completely different angle than I've read before. And I wanted to make sure, because I was, it was interesting. I was laughing about this, but when I was searching for other werewolf books online to get a feeling for it, I found out that werewolf romance is enormous as a genre, and I was so confused why that was such a big genre, and I wanted to make sure I just completely had no romance at all in my book. Right? I was like, I'm just anti-romance of my werewolf book because my angle for my werewolf book is basically the violence, the gore, the aggression of the werewolf, right? What the original character was about. And I don't want this, love story in the background or that trying to come back and redeem himself. I was like, this dude's a werewolf. He's going to be doing werewolf things, right? And I wanted to keep it in that direction. And it's things like that when you think about that and doing that as a traditional, they may want something in there, right? They go, oh, you may have to have something for the character arc, right, to be able to redeem himself, or you need some kind of love interest in the back to give balance to all the violence and gore you have going through the book. And I didn't want that, so that's why for me, self-publishing was the better way to go because I wanted to keep the vision that I had and just stay on that.
That is an issue I've noticed with traditional is, they like, obviously it's to try and make the book as marketable and as profitable for them as possible. At the end of the day, they're trying to make a profit. But so it's like these little tweaks that they want you to make to sort of like slot you into like the general formula. Like, as much as we hate to say it, like it's probably there's a reason why romance werewolf stories are big. But it's like it is pretty cool to go sort of against the grain and make like you put your own spin on it and stuff. It's sort of like a unique approach, which is like another good benefit for self-publishing against traditional is like if it's a story that traditional wouldn't normally take on or wouldn't normally take on without like a lot of modification to fit their needs. Self-publishing is just a great route for that because then you don't have to, which is one of the main reasons why I did was because you don't have to compromise on things because it is your story that like you want to write, like regardless if it's going to be profitable or not. It's you want to make it because you just want to make it and you like writing it. Obviously, for publishing houses, they want to make it viable for them because it will be an investment on them. So if it doesn't fulfill sort of like those criteria, they will try to change it at the very least, or the very worst, I'll probably just outright just go, nah, you're not for us, unfortunately. But as I said, self-publishing is always the way to go.
Yeah, there was one author I interviewed. He went to self-publishing novels, but he was like a screenwriter before, doing TV shows and movies and stuff. And he was saying, what really finally made him make the decision to go to writing novels and doing self-publishing was he really noticed a lot of times the person that he was interacting with was basically like a graduate from a school that just came out, hadn't really written anything, and they were the ones giving him like the feedback where he could tell that they didn't even read his story, right? And he was saying that he remembers one specific one that he turned in a story, and the guy, he goes, you know what? He goes, peacocks are big right now. You should have a peacock in the story. And the guy's like, my story takes place in like downtown Philadelphia. Where am I going to put a peacock in the middle of the story? And he goes, you start noticing that sometimes these people making decisions aren't even reading your pieces, right? They already come in with a preset thing they need, like, oh, we need this for the trend or whatever. And, again, it's just to remind you not to get down on yourself, right? Not to think that decision of a no is anything against your talent or your work, because you just don't know what kind of effort that the other side is putting into that.
That's the other thing as well. You just mentioned something about trends as well. I've noticed, like, I'm not calling out anyone who does trend chasing. Like, that's perfectly fine if that's how you want to write. But the issue is that when you're writing to chase trends, like if you finish the book and the trend's over, well, well, oh, whoops, all right. Like, yeah, it's like, so I sort of just like, instead of sort of like trying to follow what other people want, sort of just pretty much write the stories that you would want to read.
Be genuine to your own voice really is the key to remember. I mean, trends, I come from a furniture background. I design furniture, and one of the biggest things is the market in terms of the trends and stuff. And it's the most dangerous thing if you ever try to chase a trend, because everything, no matter what it is, whether it's music, furniture, books, movies, everything has a life cycle, right? And you need to be able to get in that beginning of the life cycle when it's a trend to ride through that cycle. And the cycles can be very, very short. The key to it in anything, right? Again, whether it's a book genre, furniture, or anything, fashion, the key to it is if you understand what that trend is, there's always a sweet spot in that where you do a slight modification to the trend, and that will continue the life of that life cycle. But if everybody keeps the same look, same style, like if you think of fashion when the bell bottoms came back into style for a little bit, if you just everything just goes bell bottoms, it'll quickly go away again because it gets boring, right? But if you were to come in, say, to a bell bottom style for pants, and you slightly altered it into something new while keeping that traditional trend, that makes that thing last longer. And it's the same thing with the genre of a book. If you're jumping into werewolf romance, your werewolf romance should be something different to be able to extend, because what's going to happen is everybody just gets tired of it. It's the same cookie cutter thing sometimes, and I don't want to say that all the authors are doing that, but when certain trends sometimes are like same cookie cutter thing, and it's feeding you the same thing, changing names, changing locations, some small changes here and there, but you're basically getting the same thing, and that's when those things will die out. And if you don't catch it at the right time, your thing comes out and it's already dead, and there goes your story. You have the handful that are still sticking with it and enjoy reading it, but it's hard. Trends are the worst thing to try to chase unless you really, really, truly understand what's making that trend work.
Especially when how you said so have to get in at the right time. That's normally right at the start, before it starts to peak. So it really is before you know that it becomes a trend that you can sort of get in on it. Often by the time you know it's a trend, when you've
it's already on that roller coaster, right? It's already starting to do this.
Pretty much, yeah. It's just one grade up, and then it's slowly going down. By the time you know it's a trend, it's already on the way down. So you're fighting a losing battle to try and keep up with it.
Yep, absolutely. So, in terms of your style of writing, what you enjoy, do you feel sci-fi is really where you're going to stay? Do you think in the future you may try different genres, or do you have any, works that you're working on now that are in the same genre or kind of branching out a little?
So, like any good author, I have a million work in progresses that are just varying states of completion. Some of them are sci-fi. I do want to do more spread in fantasy. One of my work in progresses, which I just shelved just for various writing issues, was a sci-fi fantasy. I really enjoy fantasy as well, stuff like Lord of the Rings and all that stuff. I love that type of stuff, so I wanted to get in on that. I will eventually. Those are the two main genres. I do have one or two like contemporary, like a mystery as well in there. But it's what I'm working on now actually is the sequel to Mark of Eternity, which is still sci-fi, obviously, but with a little bit more like in Mark of Eternity, it isn't really picked up, but there is a little bit of a fantasy element in there that sort of becomes more prevalent in the sequel as readers learn more about the universe that Eve and all that find themselves in.
Did you go into that book thinking there would be a sequel, or is it something that just kind of came about as you finished, or did you have an idea that maybe this might be a series of books?
It's common with all my work in progresses. I've sort of go into it thinking, yeah, it'll just be a standalone, just a one story sort of thing. And then about half, I think it was about near the end, I was like, oh no, I can actually have a good idea to sort of continue this on. So for this one, it'll just be the duology for now. I know, unless when I'm writing this one, I think of something else, but I intend for it to be a duology. Yeah, this one will just be the two. It's the same with pretty much most of my books. So like the work in progress, I just shelved. It was supposed to be just a single one, and then it became a duology, and then a trilogy. And I'm like, oh, okay, I got to put it down for now. Otherwise, I'm not going to get anything done if it just keeps getting longer. Yeah.
Future-wise, do you have any kind of goals that you want to do as an author? Is there anything specific you want to make sure you tackle or write in the future that maybe not part of your, group of work in progresses right now, but maybe something at some point you really want to take on?
So I would like to eventually become traditionally published, but that's sort of like way off. It's not priority for now. Well, I would really like to do. So when I've been writing for 10-ish years or so, and at the start that was of this fantasy series, and I've sort of been doing it on and off. Like I've got like really good ideas for it. It's just a matter of me figuring out a way to execute it. And I would love to eventually get around to it and actually start to write it, really, like sort of like give it like the attention and the respect that it deserves as a story, because it is pretty much like these story series that I want to write is all more of like these other books that I'm writing now beforehand is like me sort of getting better at writing in preparation for it. But that's my main goal really as a writer, is to pretty much do that series and all that stuff. Everything else is sort of just prepping for it.
Okay. So sci-fi and fantasy are really kind of the two genres that you write in. Generally, really when you look at any published work, there's usually subgenres that are in, right? It could be has a thriller vibe or has a crime background or anything on that side. Do you find some of those other genres, or have you ever read any of those other genres that have kind of found their way leaking into your stories or your writing?
There's a little bit of crime that sort of seeped its way in. Post-apocalyptic as well, sort of like both like contemporary and sci-fi, post-apocalyptic and stuff. And a little bit of like murder mystery as well. I haven't read too much of it, but like of the ones I have read, they have managed to find their way in, just like little sprinklings, I suppose you could call it.
Yep. Yeah, it's really something that, as I've been doing this podcast and really, interviewing and looking at all these different works, it is really something that I've noticed that happens quite often. There's really a lot of subgenres within a genre, right? It could be basically one of them was like a historical fiction, but there was a whole crime story in the background throughout the book, right? And it's just it really goes back to the breadth of a reader you are, right? Or doesn't necessarily need to be reading, right? It probably is better in terms of reading, but it's that breadth of genre that you enjoy that kind of give your story that extra life, right? And again, it's whether it's that crime thriller in the background, maybe an aspect of horror within your sci-fi or fantasy, but any of those subgenres that really makes your story different from, say, some of the other books in the same genre that, like you mentioned earlier about standing out. giving you something that stands out a little different from everybody else.
Yeah, it really is just sort of like pretty much just like just adding like little bit like ingredients to it just to make it a bit different. So as you said, horror, like Mark Paterney has elements of horror in it. There's no like actual like physical like antagonist or monster, but it has like those deep dark sort of like horror vibes about it just from the environment. And that was just something that I wanted to add just because that'd be pretty cool and sort of add a bit of like tension and stuff like that. That's sort of what the genre mixing can give you. Like if you want to change up a story, as you said, just put in a little bit of and like not like a contrasting genre, but like another genre that will be able to fit in really well with it. Like obviously sci-fi fantasy is like a real like typical one, but like I haven't seen too many like fantasy like crime solving or something like that, or like mystery, and the ones I have seen are done really well just because they sort of work together and it's a nice twist on both of those genres.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to remind the viewers that I will leave down below the links for Zach for the book. I'll leave links for his socials, website, whatever he has to put up so you can find him and his work, his current work and his future work. I want to thank you again for coming on today, Zach. I really enjoyed our chat and our conversation. Basically about your book and everything you're kind of working on and how you approached it. And if you like the episode, please like it below. Leave a comment for either Zach or myself. If you have a question, if you just want to let us know what you enjoyed about the video, we would truly appreciate that. And again, thank you for coming on today, Zach. I truly appreciated it. And thank you, the viewers, for watching.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. Goodbye.